Welcome back to the Patron Saints of Pop Culture podcast. I'm Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about The Marvelous Mrs Maisel, Season 1, available on Amazon Prime.
We invite you... Well, we're not going to give you a spoiler alert, primarily because it's been out for a while. It came out in 2017. Mm-hmm. Season 2 came out in 2018.
And we're just waiting for Season 3, because it's coming out too.
Yeah, it's coming out this year. So we are inviting you to catch up with us. Check it out on Amazon Prime. It's one of those shows that you're like, oh yeah, you heard about it, but you never really wanted to give it a try until you actually did. And you'll find out that it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I had actually heard from a few people that I follow on Facebook. And we all have those few Facebook friends that we know if they recommend a show that it's going to be good because they generally like the same taste in shows as you do. So I saw them talking about The Marvelous Mrs Maisel and how it's so funny and relevant. And I was like, how is a 50s housewife relevant? But okay, I'll give it a try. And oh my gosh, like, it is so funny. I kind of just want to rewatch it as kind of like a palate cleanser between some of the other shows that are a little bit more sad that we watch.
Speaking of which, let's give our summary and review then. Mm-hmm. The show obviously is about a 1950s housewife who goes through a very traumatic event and discovers a new career path and dream, which just happened to be her ex-husband's dream job.
All right.
Okay, that's my summary.
All right. Okay, so what you perceive to be as a happy married couple aren't so happy. They end up being separated. She drinks a lot, finds herself on a stage, tells some jokes. She kills it. People love her. They try to convince her to come back. She does some more jokes. And then she's like, hey, I can do this for the rest of my life. And then she, as far as we know, does.
I didn't know what to expect from this. I know that a lot of people actually did recommend it. And we are Amazon Prime members, and you know, there were a few things that we watched here and there on Amazon Prime that were Amazon originals that I just didn't really enjoy all that much. Like The Man in High Castle, I didn't enjoy it all that much.
You know, I think you're right. Now that I think about it, a lot of the Amazon Prime original shows that they have, unless it's like for kids, because there's some like kid shows that like we like to, I wouldn't say like to watch with Peter. We tolerate being able to watch these shows with kids. But for the older audience, this is by far one of the best things they've put out that we've seen. And
I would say that it's definitely worthy of the awards that it's gotten. It's been very award winning. It's won 3 Golden Globes.
The Globe itself.
Has been a 2-time Emmy winner. Has won a Peabody Award, and not just for the best comedy series, but also for actors and actresses, which they all do a very brilliant job in the show. And it's just, I find it to be, it is one of those rare uplifting shows that deal with some heavier adult issues that are out there. And I think that it's a must watch pretty much for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what makes it funny too, of course, like she's funny in itself, but the situations that she gets herself in is still very relatable even to an audience watching it from, 2019. And so I think that also is something that has helped it gain some popularity because people go through divorces every single day, moms who don't normally work all of a sudden have to be going into the workforce. So I think that in itself, because it is relatable, even though it's set in the 1950s, has definitely helped to propel its popularity.
Well, and that's what I think so many shows, especially after Mad Men. Mad Men was one of those 1950s period pieces that went into the 1960s that it was just... It wasn't uplifting, but you couldn't stop watching it.
Yeah.
It was kind of like you're watching this train wreck of Don Draper.
Yes.
Throughout all of these seasons until he finally just kind of, implodes in the final. And this one, it really feels more, oh, well, there's a traumatic event, but it's not weighing down the show. And so that's, for me, it made it a brilliant show. So yes, I highly recommend it. This is my review really good. I really liked it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. As you can tell, I also really liked it. I also like it too, because if you look at the articles written about it, there's people, who are saying that they are portraying what life really was like for a Jewish family in New York in the 1950s, and like the things that would have happened like to them. Yeah. So not only are they getting awards, from, Hollywood and everything, but they're also getting a lot of praise from the community that it's supposed to represent. And so that in itself is also very good, because
aside from the forgetting that, Yom Kippur is a fasting day.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I mean, they kind of made up for it a little bit, but that's okay. But anyway, so I really liked it. I almost forget, though, that it's set in the 1950s, which I think is another reason why I like it, because she'll say something in a joke, and then, somebody will come up to her and say, "You can't say that on stage." And I'm just like, what do you mean you can't say that on stage? Those are the types of jokes that are out there all the time now. So that's another reason why I like it.
So it was very well recommended from us, I would say.
Yes, and I'm kind of sad that we didn't start watching it before. When we were done watching the first season, I'm like, what took us so long? Why did we wait so long to watch this?
We had other things to watch in between, too, which, kind of made us stop watching stop watching at the end of the season before we watched season 2. But we definitely needed the palate cleanser in between, because it was...
This would be the perfect palate cleanser for Handmaid's Tale. If you're going to binge watch Handmaid's Tale...
Yeah, watch an episode of Handmaid's Tale and then watch an episode of this. Because it'll get that...
sadness and grief and...
rage and Gilead out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. And back to reality a little bit. I want to focus a little bit more on something that Amy Sherman Palladino, who is the show writer, something that she said in an interview about the show, primarily because I really felt the themes pull through the entire, well, not just first season, but also the second season as well. And we'll talk more about that later. But, when I was looking her up, I found out that she was a writer on Gilmore Girls, and she's worked on a lot of different things before. I thought, well, she must be a stand-up comedian, which is not the case. That she took a lot of inspiration from Joan Rivers and from other people to kind of sit down and write this, which it was just, well, like we just said, it was brilliantly written. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she said in an interview, and this is highly paraphrased, that she wanted to do a story about a woman who believed that she had everything, that she had it all, and then fell apart. And while falling apart, she discovers ambition and a need to speak. She discovers her voice, which I thought that was absolutely beautiful, because I think this is something that so many of us need, especially when dealing with traumatic events. And we've talked about so many shows that deal with trauma and with grief. I mean, the OA, we're going through episode by episode right now. And this is something that not many shows actually deal with, is that aftermath of what do you do afterwards? Mm-hmm. Is how do you discover kind of this new persona, this new idea afterwards? That so many shows just kind of leave it there, leave it in the grief, rather than moving it forward and saying, okay, life still goes on. Let's move on. Which this show does absolutely brilliantly. I think that it really encapsulates it in the very first episode, when Midge is just overjoyed about getting the rabbi to come to the Yom Kippur dinner, which without full context really isn't supposed to be a thing. But primarily the overjoyedness of it and the joy of her life as it is, and supporting her husband, as, we come to find out throughout the rest of the episode that Joel kind of is a jerk, that, just seeing this joy of her kind of seeing this having exactly what she wanted, being exactly in that place in her life where suddenly she loses it when Joel announces that he's leaving, that, he did, just horribly. And now he's, kind of breaking their life apart. So, can you really know when you have it all is what I want to kind of ask.
That's really hard to say. I know right now I don't think I have it all. But I also know that if something big were to happen and I were to lose everything, I would think back at this time as thinking that I had it all.
Well, and there's the thing is that I don't think that we can really ever know that we have it good unless we understand what not having something really is.
Yeah.
I think it does take a traumatic event oftentimes for people to realize really truly what they have. If they have a good relationship, if they have a good family life, if they have, just things are good in and of themselves, that we can't really understand that what we truly have until we lose it.
Yeah. Or just to, as like an opposite way, you can also go from, this is obviously not in the case in their story, but there are cases where you can start off with nothing and then appreciate what you have earned along the way at the end. Kind of like the exact opposite, yeah. But not for this story.
Well, and that's very much true about story in general, that you have to go through a journey to really fully appreciate the things that you didn't even realize that you wanted. Mm-hmm. And, well, for this one, this is a journey for her to find an unrealized need. The unrealized need is to use her talent of speaking in front of people, of being just comedic and just this overwhelmingly good presence on stage.
Well, and I think another driving force too, just speaking as a working mom myself, also the need to be more than what I am.
Yeah.
Be more than just a mom.
Well, speaking of you, why don't you discuss a time when you really experienced kind of that trauma where you felt like you had it all and you didn't appreciate it until you actually lost it?
I would say when we ended up leaving Colorado Springs, because I really liked my job, I really liked my coworkers, and I was very sad that I was leaving them. Mm-hmm.
And, I think there's a lot of times in my own life when I've experienced this. Even recently in my own kind of transition, my own, I think some people would call it loss of faith, but it's not really a loss of faith. I know where it is. It's more that my beliefs have transitioned into a new belief system, that I'm not exactly the same person that I was before. Mm-hmm. And that was extremely traumatizing for me. It was that, looking back on things now, like even with money issues, for instance, thinking about when I was a youth minister, that I would oftentimes think, oh, well, God will provide, God will give me these things. And now it's like, I really don't know, that I don't have faith that some otherworldly, some cosmic slot machine will really, give me these things. Bring down quarters. Yeah. Or provide me with some financial stability, which when I look back on it, never really came. Mm-hmm. It's just my own mind changed about it. So I think that's really finding a new way of looking at the world, rather than looking at the world the same way that you've always looked at the world. And I think this is something that it takes Susie to really do it for Midge in this series. And she does a fantastic job of selling her on the fact that she needs to be a comedian, mm-hmm. that this is something that she's gifted in. This is something that she's just raw talent, that she could help to mold her, which Susie's going through her own transition at that time too, which is becoming a manager and helping her with this whole thing. But do you really think it takes a guide? Do you think it takes somebody for each of us to really kind of help us to find that transition into the new life?
Well, I don't think that the guide necessarily has to be a person.
Okay.
You know, I think that, well, depending on the person, if you are able to kind of look back at your situation from a different point of view, now that you've experienced your fall, and figure out what exactly you did or the things that happened to cause your fall, then you can kind of, make the changes yourself. But that also takes a very strong person, because it's really hard for somebody to look back and say, yep, I was the one that did this. I was the one that caused this. Because when you go through a trauma initially, it's, for most people, just to kind of my own general knowing of people, they blame other people. They blame their situation on other people. They blame the situation on things that have happened to them, but they hardly ever blame themselves, when in reality, they had to have done something to kind of help said event from occurring in most circumstances.
Well, I think this shows the importance of narrative. It shows the importance of story, especially because oftentimes stories can be that guide. Mm-hmm. It can be like a movie or a TV show or even a book, something that helps you to realize for yourself, oh my goodness, this is what I've been doing. This is who I was. I need to be better. I need to be different. And I think that's very true about this show. This is why I say it's a very important show, because it does that. It does take us, not just leave us in the grief, but it moves us forward. Mm-hmm. This is a metamorphosis for a couple of the characters. In fact, all of them are going through their own kind of difficulties and traumas and dealing with them and moving on and becoming new people. Especially
Imogene.
No,
I'm just kidding.
She does it her own way. Yeah. But this is something that is extremely difficult for Midge. It's something that she denies at first, and through the parties that she just starts gathering crowds around her, and she starts telling these funny stories, and she starts just being the comedian that she's gifted as. She realizes, oh, this is something that I do love. This is something that I do want, even though some people have warned me away. Even though I did bond that one time. This is something that I want. And, this is something that I think all of us can relate to, that we've all been through that, a time or a situation where we've needed to change. And it's just difficult. So tell me about a time when you've experienced something like that, where you've gone through a metamorphosis, that you realized that you needed to do something else, that you needed to be something else.
So I would say the biggest one that I think most people might relate to was the job that I had in New York. My boss definitely did not treat me very well. She was rude. She basically made me so nervous to actually go into work that I would cry on my drives to work, because I was filled with so much dread and so much anxiety. And now, I would never let myself get into that type of situation again. I would definitely speak up more. I would be an advocate for myself, and I would go to the right people, because even when I did try to speak up at that job, it was just, oh, it's okay, Kathy, you need to stay, we really appreciate your hard work, and it's not really her fault that she's like this, so, you need to step it up. And I'm just thinking to myself, I don't know how much more I can step it up. I mean, I am trying to do my job. I have to work overtime to finalize everything, but you're also telling me I can't have any more overtime hours. But anyway, that's a different thing. But anyway, so I think back to your question, my metamorphosis was having to realize that I need to be an advocate for myself.
All right.
The end. I know that's kind of long-winded, but
well, and I think that's very true for all of us, is that we do, oftentimes the only person you have is yourself. And that's okay. That really is okay. that you can be an advocate for yourself. And this is something that I think that Midge needed to learn as well. And especially there's that scene where she, says to Susie that she needed her to be her manager, that she needed to, help to handle these issues when they came up, when she had bad days and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, overall, I think this was a great story to kind of display that.
Absolutely. All right, is it my turn?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So I kind of already alluded to this at the beginning of the podcast, but I'm going to be talking about modern motherhood because at this point in time in the 1950s, a little bit beforehand, like during World War II, we started seeing more women enter into the workplace. When the war was over, they were kind of pushed back out of the workplace. But at this point in time, there were more women in the workforce than really ever before because it was one out of necessity. And then also two, they realized that it is possible to be able to be a mom and also work. And we're still kind of evolving that idea even to today. So Rachel Brosnahan, who actually plays Midge, she's done a couple of interviews. She's done an interview for BuzzFeed News, and then also she did an interview on Elite Daily, both talking about how she's responding to the criticism about how Midge is parenting, or some people would consider lack of parenting. And her big argument is this story isn't about Midge's parenting. Like, this isn't a story about a mom. This is a story about a comedian. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we're following along with that storyline. And she does admit, she's like, okay, Midge is not about to get any Mother of the Year awards. Like, she's not saying that Midge is like a great mom because, maybe she does not give the attention that she needs to give to her children as much as she should. But also at this point in time, that was kind of the thing to do with the kids.
Yeah.
Parenting has definitely evolved, that's for sure. And she also mentions, too, that if she were a father or if she were Joel being, Midge's husband or soon-to-be ex-husband because they're kind of separated but not divorced yet, mm-hmm. that this wouldn't be an issue and nobody would be questioning this. If the tables were turned and, Midge had left Joel and then Joel was like, oh no, I have to go find a new career now. It wouldn't be an issue. It wouldn't be something that would be talked about in interviews with her. Like it just wouldn't be brought up. And I really like how the show does show us that moms can focus on careers too, mm-hmm. just like dads can. And even though it's not always expected of us, that it should be encouraged. But that's just my own personal opinion. So what were your expectations you had? Like, I'm speaking more of like when you were younger. What was your expectation of moms? Just in general.
I grew up in a very evangelical church, so my expectations were set by that sort of 1950s era of the image of family. Whereas, mom stayed at home, dad worked, and that the dad was the head of the household, that it was a very, very patriarchal kind of model where, the male was the head of the household, the male was the head of the church, the male was, the one that's supposed to be in charge. And, this was not something that I questioned primarily because I was male. Of course, I'm, only half white male. My skin is white, so most people wouldn't give it second thought. Oh yeah, I would be the man in power because I look white and I'm male. Mm-hmm. Obviously those ideas did change and sometimes very dramatically. I did go through several metamorphoses on that alone, so that obviously is very different from how I view things now.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, he does not feel that way anymore. I can tell you that right now. So for me growing up, I also too, grew up in a household that also went to church, but my mom worked a full-time job. All of my friends' moms also worked full-time jobs. there was one boy in particular that I remember going to school. His mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I just thought it was so weird because he wouldn't eat lunch with the rest of us. He would actually walk home, eat lunch, and then come back to school.
Yeah, that is a little weird.
Isn't it kind of weird? Anyway, but I just thought it was weird because everybody else's moms worked, and so I really didn't see any problem with moms working because I didn't feel neglected, in any way. I still was fed and clothed and loved. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of lucky and I didn't have that expectation thrown upon me because I had a good example of what a mom could be, a working mom could be. I love you, Mom. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I like this show is because it is more of a real life example of what working moms do. In most TV shows, if there's a working mom, she's working a regular 9-to-5 job, which, by the way, if you get that in real life, you're lucky. Also, when she comes home, she makes dinner, she gets the kids ready for bed, she cleans the house, she basically is expected to work full time, but then also do all the rest of the household chores as well, too. And that's just not realistic, and it's going to drive you crazy. And I mean, there's plenty of podcasts out there you can listen to about how that's not healthy and how women are actually more overworked than men are because of this expectation that we have put upon, moms, working moms. So I won't go too far into it. And in fact, I think we could end the stereotypes that the other TV shows, not Mrs. Marvel, however, other TV shows has put upon moms by becoming a little bit more egalitarian in our households. And by egalitarian, if you don't know or don't want to, open up your phone to figure out what it is, it's more of a kind of like equal sharing of the household chores. So just equal sharing of, stuff that needs to be done around the household in general. Some people just want that to include just, the adults that live at home. Other people want to include the children in that as well too. I'm hoping to include our child in this when he gets old enough. We've tried to give him some chores like feeding the dog, and he, air quotes, dusts. I give him a rag and he kind of wipes things off, but then I go back and re-wipe it because, he's not that great. Bless his heart, but he's not that great at it yet. And I do think that it's... I hear stories from other working moms about how they are constantly moving. It's nonstop moving around the house or moving at work. And when they get home, they don't have any time to rest. And there's a huge burnout. And, that's why a lot of moms, go to the salon and get their nails done and that kind of stuff, because it's their one chance to actually sit down and do something for themselves. Me, I feel like I don't have to do that because I have somebody in the household who's helping me. I'm not the only one that's making dinner. Like, you're right there with me, helping me make dinner. In fact, I will stop listing the ways that you help me because that's my next question. Just so, our listeners can learn by example. What are some things that you help out around the house? Or, with Peter as well, too. Like, what are some things, extra duties that you do that you might not see other, male role father figures do?
I don't know that a lot of them get displayed on a lot of these narrative structures, primarily because, they're boring and, they don't make for good stories.
What do you mean? Laundry is boring?
Laundry, it's yard work, getting the kid ready in the morning, making sure that they have breakfasts, making sure that, playing with them, giving attention to them, spending time with your child, rather than, all these other things. They're not good narrative, things, but they add to the narrative of the child's life. I think in the long run, for their own story, if their parent is there, if both parents are there doing these things.
Yeah, well, I think it's important for a household to be egalitarian because that also gives the mom some chance to actually bond with her child. I mean, in TV shows and movies, somehow she also manages to bond with her children. But in reality, if you are doing all those things, like doing all the chores, making all the food, and working, you have no time for yourself, let alone giving a little bit of extra attention to your kid.
Yeah.
You know, so if you have that other person in the house who's not just going to, take their shoes off, grab a beer and go sit down and watch television for the rest of the night, if you have an actual partner in the household, it's going to make everything just function a lot easier. And you're going to actually be able to build better relationships with everybody in the house.
Yeah. For instance, my mom, she had to work 3 jobs to support my brother and me growing up. We were both teenagers. We were both in high school, but she still found time to make it to the plays that I was in. She still found time to make it to the things that were important to my brother. And, that in and of itself, I think is a miracle. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fact that she had to do these 3 jobs just to make ends meet where we were living. And it's kind of insane what we really expectations that are placed upon a lot of these single parents and a lot of these people who kind of go through these traumatic events. It's not going to be pretty, but you're going to have to do what you got to do. Yeah.
I'm just lucky that I have somebody like you, Miguel, who, if I ask you to do the dishes, you might, give me a sigh, but you will do it, and you're not going to argue because that I'm asking you for a reason. And it's usually because I have to do something else, but also the dishes also need to be done.
Yep.
Also, the dishes need to be done.
So we're going to be doing something brand new. We just thought of this over the course of our break. In fact, there's a funny story that goes behind this. This is something that was brought up. One night, our son, at daycare, they get taught to pray before their meals. And we were sitting down for dinner, and he kind of looks at us and he goes, "Pray?" And we both kind of look at each other and we're like, we don't do that at home. Mm-hmm. We haven't done that at home for a long time. And so we just kind of were like, okay, well, why don't you pray? Why don't you do this? And then we started thinking, well, why don't we come up with prayers from people from pop culture? And I was like, well, why don't we name saints from pop culture? Because honestly, that's kind of what we do. We find these truths in pop culture, and it's just, not only is it a fun thing to do, but it's also something that would be, like, I think, helpful for people. So we decided, we're going to take a page out of the book of the very popular podcast, Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. A little shout out to them, that we're going to name a saint that we found in whatever it is that we're talking about.
But they call it blessings. They don't call it saints. They bless people who have also experienced something that they're of the character that they're blessing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we're doing it differently. But that's what also inspired the idea, was that we're going to name a saint from that. Also, we're going to be doing a series of writings on saints from pop culture on the website. So that's www.patronsaintsofpopculture.org. And you can see the first one there. We've put Katniss Everdeen up there, so Saint Katniss, and we named her the patron saint of volunteers. And so for this one, I would definitely say that for season 1 of the Marvelous Mrs Maisel, that I would name Midge as the patron saint of trauma recovery. The reason being, I think that her miracles are pretty self-evident in this, but she first goes through that trauma, but also begins to build herself up again afterwards, that she doesn't stay there. And she does stay there for a little bit, but she doesn't remain there. Mm-hmm. She moves forward. She moves on. She rebuilds. And this is the great thing about the entire series, is that she's doing this. And I think that in and of itself is a miracle, but also being a full-time working mom in the 1950s and realizing that she doesn't need her husband. She doesn't need Joel to be there and continually making things, difficult in her life just because she needs some financial security. She's like, no, I can do this. I can work on my own. I can be my own person. So that's her second miracle.
Well, I'd also say, too, that her first miracle there is helping her to become a better mom.
Yeah.
You know, when you yourself are doing a job that you actually like and enjoy, when you come home at night, you might be a little tired, but you're not going to be so, like, I hate the world attitude, you know, because kids pick up on that kind of stuff. So I think this is actually going to help her as a mom, too. And sorry if you hear the fireworks in the back. So my saint, I'm going to choose Midge's father, Abe. Saint Abe. I really don't have like a shortened version of what he should be the patron saint of, so I'm just going to say his miracles because I think it kind of is encompassing of a lot of things. But the first miracle that he did, or the first miracle I'm going to acknowledge, is that he accepted Midge right off, like when she said, Dad, no, I'm not going to go back to him. I can't go back to him. Like, this is not an option for me. It's just a no. I can't do it. And he was just like, okay. You know, he was very accepting. So I guess he's a patron saint of being accepting, I guess.
Of acceptance.
Of acceptance.
Not so much in season 2, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Is when it's convenient for Abe.
When it's convenient.
Which I think he would agree with us. Anyway. And then also, too, his second miracle is that the decision that Midge made, he kept between him and Midge. She was not ready to tell her mom because her mom probably would have had a panic attack and caused a whole, like, scene, and she does. But Abe is smart enough to recognize that for just a little while anyway, Midge needs to keep her decision to herself. You know, it's best if she's the one that presents this revelation to her mom and it's not his place, which is very hard. I mean, you hear, well, I don't know about you, but I've actually have witnessed somebody, you know, telling somebody that they, you know, have finally, you know, come out of the closet and said, hey, I'm part of, you know, the LGBTQ plus community. And then that person going right around and telling somebody else that person is now out of the closet and it is not their place to say.
Yeah.
You know, so the fact that Abe recognized it is not my place to say is in itself a miracle because most people can't do that.
And, I mean, can we just say that, also, I'm just going back to Midge for just a second, but because it's true for all of the actors in the show, that Rachel Brosnahan does a fantastic job of portraying her, that I actually thought she was a real person. Like, I had to go look it up and make sure that Mrs. Maisel was not a real person because it was so good. Like, it was like, this is so real. It's so true. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, it's not. It's fiction in this universe, but it's still very true. Yeah.
And then also, too, what's kind of funny, I know it's a little bit off topic, but kind of same. If you see interviews of Rachel, she's like, nothing like Mrs. Maisel. And I'm like, how?
I know.
Because usually you can see like a little hint of somebody's character in like their regular personality because that's just kind of actors draw on real life. And the fact that they're just completely, they talk different, their mannerisms are different. I'm just like, holy cow, my mind's blown. Rachel Brosnahan, if you're listening, you're amazing.
Bravo.
Yes.
Not only that, Tony Shalhoub, but that's what it, you know, made me think of it, was Tony Shalhoub was just fantastic.
Yeah.
Him and Rose together were like very real couple, which I was like, yeah, in real married couples, they're like, not telling your spouse something is very, very difficult.
Yes.
And causes a lot of stress. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you could see that it was Tony Shalhoub was, like, portraying that. Mm-hmm. And, it was just, it's brilliant. It's brilliantly acted, brilliantly written. So, just, you know, sing the praises of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Yes. So, in closing.
Yeah.
You can find us on Instagram, on Facebook, if you want to go ahead and talk a little bit more about this amazing show. We can be reached at the patron. Oh my
Patron
gosh.
saints of pop culture.
It's been a while since I've had to say that, so I'm sorry. The patron saints of pop culture. Also, too, we are on Twitter at The Honest Faith. And
Real Honest Faith.
oh my gosh. I'm sorry, everybody. It's like I said, it's been a while. Why don't you just end it so then they know exactly where to find us?
And you can also find our Patron Saints of Pop Culture will be being posted every Wednesday with a little non-religious meditation for just for fun. Mm-hmm. So you can find Katniss Everdeen on our website now at www.patronsaintsofpopculture.org. So thank you so much for listening. We invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.